Local and state politicians are outraged by Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. The Tijuana sewage that fouls our beaches is making Border Patrol agents sick, and they threaten legal action. The SoccerCity saga continues with news of multiple private meetings between the mayor and developers for over a year. And thousands of people wrongly listed in the state's gang database, but getting off the list is not easy. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are reporter Jeff McDonald of the San Diego Union-Tribune's Watchdog team. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Mark.
Good to have you back again today. Reporter Dana Littlefield, who covers legal affairs for the Union-Tribune. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Mark.
And KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you here today. Well, by pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, Donald Trump guaranteed the existential issue of climate change will finally be front and center in the 2018 and 2020 elections. That's because it takes 4 years for a nation to exit the agreement signed by 195 countries. Here's President Trump on why he made the decision.
In short, the agreement doesn't eliminate coal jobs. It just transfers those jobs out of America and the United States and ships them to foreign countries. This agreement is less about the climate and more about other countries gaining a financial advantage over the United States.
Rushing to fill the leadership void on the critical issue is Governor Jerry Brown of California. He's in China today talking strategies to combat climate change. Brown made very clear that California will take the lead and that we won't be alone.
But we're not alone. We're with China. We're with the European Union. We're with Canada. We're with Mexico. We're with the 170 plus states and provinces. So the market, if you want to sell cars, you got to sell them in China. You got to sell them in California. So you're going to have to follow the clean air standards. And so Mr. Trump is not only up against California, he's up against the rest of the world, not to mention science itself. And it's very obvious who's going to win.
All right, Eric, now that's an intriguing idea there. San Diego's among cities with robust climate plans. He mentioned California, all those other entities and countries and all. What can really these entities do as a group when Trump has pulled the U.S. out of this agreement?
Well, I think you've seen some of the reaction already. California, Washington, and New York State have agreed to work together on these climate issues. The state of California, as you heard Governor Jerry Brown say, said he's going to push forward. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer issued a statement yesterday saying that it's still a big commitment for the city of San Diego to move forward on its climate action plan, renewable energy, et cetera. So I think all politics at some level are local. And this is a political football, and it's landing squarely in the hands of people who are on the ground and doing things about it. And I think that they're running with that ball. City mayors, state officials, and people outside of the White House.
Well, and other folks are business leaders, many of them GOP supporters traditionally, and they've joined world leaders in criticizing Trump's decision. Who are some of the big CEOs that are
yeah, it's a list of some pretty large companies: IBM, Microsoft. You're talking about GE, General Electric, Shell Corporation, fossil fuel company there, says this is an important deal. A couple of notable resignations today from the President's Advisory Council. Elon Musk of Tesla stepped down from the council, saying that he didn't think that his participation there was going to be valuable in light of this decision. And also Disney's chairman, Mr. Iger, stepped down from that advisory panel as well to announce their displeasure. There is, some dissent. It's not a unified front among businesses. Some small businesses worry that the climate pact would have impacted them negatively, and so they're not totally unhappy with the way things have gone.
And of course, a lot of Republicans supported the president in this. Not all Republicans, but they were condemned by Democrats. Got a bite here from Congressman Scott Peters of San Diego. He was blunt yesterday.
So I think it's morally wrong to do it, and I think it's monumentally stupid policy to do this. We owe our children a legacy of a habitable planet, a clean planet, And exiting the Paris Agreement turns our back on that. That's one. Two, the world looks to America for leadership. And what you see in President Trump, you see this in trade, turning away from American leadership. You see him turning away from American leadership at NATO. Now with respect to the environment and climate, we're taking ourselves out of a place where we can guide the discussion, we can create a better deal for our own companies and for our own workers. We're exiting, we're leaving the table, just like Nicaragua and Syria.
One last question before we move on from this topic here. A recent poll showed Americans overwhelmingly support staying in the Paris Climate Agreement, even a majority of Trump voters. Is this even smart politics?
You can debate whether or not it's smart politics, and I think that, as with any political question, the answer will come when we get back into an election season, and you'll figure it out there. But I think the important thing to remember is that a lot of these decisions were made outside of the White House anyway. And the White House had already retreated from a lot of the regulations that would have helped the United States reach those climate action goals as the Paris Accord moved forward. So there was little chance that the United States would probably meet those climate targets that they had set for themselves in light of those regulations coming back. And how it plays politically, I think, it depends largely on how people view it, whether they see it as Mr. Trump does, as America getting back the upper hand on the world stage, or whether they see it as a retreat from the world stage.
Well, we'll find out soon enough with next year coming up on us, another major election year with the midterms in 2018. Well, we're going to shift now to another environmental story, this one directly affecting Border Patrol agents here. Here's Chris Harris of Local 1613 of the National Border Patrol Council on what his agents are dealing with.
So the sewage is coming through in the Stewart's Bridge area, it's coming through the Goat Canyon area, it's coming through Smuggler's Gulch, and it's coming through Yogurt Canyon. And when people see that road after the state park closed, they assume the Border Patrol closed it. That's simply not true. That's closed by the county and the state because there's sewage water on that street, on that road.
So kind of a basic problem here, and why are they threatening legal action?
This problem really kind of washed over the Tijuana River Valley this past winter. We had some heavy rains. There were a lot of sewage flows that came across the river. The International Wastewater and the International Boundary and Wastewater Commission estimated there could have been as much as 250 million gallons of raw sewage, untreated sewage, that washed through the Tijuana River Valley and out into the ocean. And
these agents are out there mucking around in this all the time doing their job.
Yeah. They're considering legal action to protect themselves. Chris told me yesterday that one of his agents was inspecting a flow that was coming out of Goat Canyon earlier this week, was overcome by methane fumes, which is what you associate with sewer gas, and had to go to the hospital and is suffering health effects from that to this day. So, and they have to run through the Tijuana River Valley sometimes after people who have tried to cross the border, and they're in that sewage, and he's really concerned about the health of his agents.
Now, there's a wide coalition of experts saying the contamination issue now is worse than ever. I mean, we've got Serge Dedina, mayor of Imperial Beach, on what's happening.
Well, first, we need to upgrade the sewage system in Tijuana. There's a lot of things that are breaking down when it rains because we have these old pipes. That's the first thing. Number two, that's why we need a backup system on the U.S. to capture these renegade flows. If the river's too big or flowing too large, you can't do that. But if it reaches a certain level, we need to suck that water out of the river and send it out to the outfall pipe or back to Point Loma or south of the border to a treatment plant so that it's not reaching our beaches.
All right, yeah, so this is an environmental disaster. Who else is concerned about this and speaking up?
Well, the federal government has a stake in this because they have a treaty with Mexico that is designed to sort of help them manage this cross-border problem. It's not a new problem, as you probably know. It's a problem that's been going on for decades. I think during the last 5 or 6 years, the problem wasn't so severe a lot because there wasn't as much rain. We were in the midst of that record-setting drought. Right. We didn't have all those wet weather flows, and then this last year we had this huge rain problem, and it just kind of exacerbated all the shortcomings. The EPA in the U.S. estimates that Tijuana needs $400 million worth of improvements just to handle the sewage that they're generating now. That's $400 million worth of infrastructure improvements needed so they can handle their own sewage. And, they're talking in terms of under $10 million to deal with that situation. So it's not going to get any better anytime soon, and money is a key problem there. And the federal government on this side of the border, the Trump administration, has zeroed out any funding for cross-border pollution issues in his budget proposal. And
isn't that really to, cutting off your nose to spite your face? This affects businesses near the border, affects all of us as this goes into the ocean. This is really an international problem. It's not simply limited to giving aid to a foreign country. Sure, I think it was really exacerbated because the flows were so heavy back in February. Imperial Beach residents, not people who were at the beach side, but people living in Imperial Beach, people living in San Ysidro, people living in South San Diego, noticed the stench, and it affected people's health. So it's not just a comfort or a convenience problem, it's a public health problem that we have to deal with, and it's one that we've been wrestling with as a region for many, many decades, and we're just not putting the resources in to fix the problem at this point.
This lawsuit threat, that would be not for damages for the workers. It would be to get a judge to order the feds to fix it?
I think what they're looking for is protection for the Border Patrol agents, right? So they still have to do their jobs, but they don't want to do their jobs in a hazardous environment.
But if the only solution is to upgrade the facilities in Tijuana, and the U.S. government isn't willing to spend the money, or the executive branch, then maybe they need a judicial member of the government to order them to do so?
I think that's an excellent question. Yes.
And what about, as we were talking about in the first segment, would the California Coastal Commission or other state agencies maybe step into this void if the EPA is going to cut back on funding?
The state has committed a couple of $1 million from a proposition that was passed in the mid-'80s, leftover money, to try and work with this problem. But when you look at the scope of the need in the $400 million range just on just on the Mexican side of the border, and the amounts of money that they're talking about is really very, very small.
Is Tijuana doing much on their side?
The sense that I get from talking to the officials on this side of the border is, yes, they're aware of the problem. They're trying to work with the EPA, but they're trying to find funding for this project too. And one thing that's not clear is whether or not they have the will to spend that kind of money to fix it.
Infrastructure funding all the way around.
And Tijuana continues to grow. That's the other caveat.
So it figures to get worse, right? More people and more sewage. We'll certainly look forward to seeing what happens if that lawsuit's filed and what the result is on that. Well, we're just now finding out that Mayor Kevin Faulconer met privately for more than a year with FS Investors, the developers behind the multi-billion-dollar proposal for the Qualcomm Stadium site in Mission Valley. SoccerCity features a stadium, thousands of housing units, millions of square feet of retail space, and a river park. And the plan could go before voters as early as November. But this new twist to the story behind how we ended up with just one development plan to consider is intriguing. And we were talking about that recently on this show, Jeff. Geez, there's ideas, 4 or 5 of them floating around out there, but it looks like voters are going to have an up or down on this one idea. And your story talked about a lot of these meetings. Who was involved and where did they take place? And the public wasn't really invited.
Well, the public was not invited, which I think is the crux of the issue. We had been asking at the UT for a list of the mayor's meetings with these investors for months, since March. And just last week, they provided what we had asked for, just a list, not the communications themselves. So we've been trying to get to the bottom of this since earlier this year. The meetings showed that he started, the records show that he started meeting with these people as early as January 2016, a time which is important because the Chargers were still considering Qualcomm Stadium as a site at that point. So it is a question of what kind of access this group got compared to other developers that might have wanted to put forward some proposal that's competing with the SoccerCity plan. And
so again, in the meetings, who were the people meeting with the mayor, and who in the mayor's staff was meeting with them?
At the very first meeting, it was hosted by Morgan Dean Oliver, who's a principal in the Oliver McMillan development firm. It was hosted at his office. The SDSU president was there. The FS partner, Michael Stone, was there. Mr. Oliver was there. Mr. Faulconer was there. And we don't know what was discussed. We've asked for that. That's not been forthcoming. So presumably they provided their presentation to the mayor at that point, and follow-up meetings refined it some more.
Oliver not a direct investor in this?
We learned out this week that he's not. We've been pressing him for some time, and he told me early this week that he made the introductions. He attended a follow-up meeting, I think, in May of last year, but he doesn't have any formal role in the investment or the project.
Anything illegal about these particular meetings?
Nothing. No. In fact, the argument is they're both reasonable sides to both sides of the argument, because you want your mayor to be soliciting and entertaining economic development projects that are going to create thousands of jobs and certainly a bigger tax base. On the other hand, you also want the mayor to be exercising a level playing field with anybody else who's interested in the same opportunity. So the mayor's critics on this issue say that he could have put it out to bid, or less formally not put it out to bid, at least made it clear that the property was in play and there were very likely to be some major investment at that site, and all the developers around San Diego should take their best shot and propose something.
Eric?
What made it seem that the property was not in play, I guess? If you were another developer in town and you were looking at that property,
had ideas of your own?
Certainly there were the public discussions about the charges that were unresolved at the time, but what made you think that at any time ever that you couldn't come forward with a proposal?
Well, that land has been snake bit for a couple of reasons for years, with traffic and with environmental pollution on the site from its oil work years ago. So that's been an inhibitor. I think that after the Chargers announced that they preferred downtown, which was, I think, February of 2016, that's when other projects might have come and other developers might have started sniffing around and putting forward some of their own ideas. Why that didn't happen, I can't say. Maybe they just got caught unawares. That's an interesting question. You could say that some of the critics, who are some of the rival developers to FS, they've had years to put forward the same plan or a similar plan that FS has brought forward, and they didn't do it. So the mayor's position is that, look, we want to bring a major sports team back to San Diego. We want to develop that property in a way that's going to benefit the community, create jobs, and a premier destination for tourists. So it's a good deal.
Now, Eric, you've done some stories on San Diego State. They were, as Just said, at the meetings to begin with. They're kind of out of this. They're not crazy about SoccerCity. What's happening there?
Well, and we should also bring out that they'd also talked to developers over the course of the last 2 years. They talked to JMI Realty, which is the John Moore's own group that had some suggestions about that site that kind of took public fruit in the Measure D initiative. They wanted to bring that over to the university, develop that campus and the park, et cetera. But they didn't get the sense that JMI was ready to kind of pull the trigger. They also talked with Mr. Manchester about possibly working together to develop that thing, and those discussions didn't bear fruit either. So there have been some other developers in play looking at the site, but nobody, I think, at this point had come.
And they're just not crazy about the SoccerCity idea. They've really, San Diego State is not backing it.
FS Investors is the only developer that has access to the MLS bid. They're like they have an exclusive rights with the league to kind of go after that expansion team. So that's not a plum that the other developers would be able to offer. But they could certainly develop the land, build the park, meet the university's needs. All those other things are in play.
Now, Jeff, what sort of reaction are you getting to your story here? I know you quoted former Councilwoman Donna Fry, now always an open government advocate, saying this is not a good deal for the public. What are you hearing?
I got a lot of response from regular readers who were outraged to learn that the mayor would be talking to developers, which I found interesting because it begs the question of why wouldn't the mayor be talking to developers when someone wants to bring forward a proposal? Again, I think the outrage stems from the feeling that it's kind of been a done deal and a backroom deal, which is exactly what Councilman Alvarez called it when I reached out to his office. They were not aware to the extent of the meetings and the longevity of them. So the criticism has been that while the mayor's expected to promote economic development, attract jobs, he's also expected to create a level playing field for everybody, especially with a high-profile property like Mission Valley.
All right, we'll keep an eye on the story. We certainly have not heard the end of SoccerCity with the ads going forward and campaigning already underway. Well, for some young people living in the city's toughest neighborhoods, being known as a gang member is a source of pride. It means empowerment, even survival. For others, it's a yoke they're trying to shed or an unjust burden they never should have been forced to bear in the first place. Dana, start with what it means to be a documented, quote, documented gang member in a California city like San Diego.
Well, San Diego specifically, well, the state has a number of criteria that it sets out as what law enforcement can consider when documenting a person. There's a list of 9 criteria. It might be gang tattoos. It might be gang-related clothing. Now, there's some subjectivity there, what would be considered gang-related clothing. Who you hang out with, if you hang out with known gang members, if you hang out in areas that are known to be claimed or frequented by gang areas. These are all the various types of criteria that law enforcement considers. In San Diego specifically, however, whereas other agencies would look at 2 of those criteria to in order to document someone, San Diego PD says it uses 3. So that could be 1 contact where you meet 3 of the criteria. It could also be 3 separate contacts where you meet at least 1 of those criteria.
All right, and your story partly focused on this statewide database of gang members, CalGang. What's that, and what are some of the problems with it?
Yes, so CalGang is a database used by law enforcement throughout the state. And it's supposed to be a tool that these law enforcement agencies can use in order to share information about known gang members, suspected gang members. It's not supposed to be a tool that's used directly in prosecuting someone, for example. However, the information that is in that database can point to outside information, documents, field interviews, etc., that may come up in a criminal proceeding.
All right. We do have a bite here from Danielle Iredale, attorney who's helping people find out if they're in the database, and she's citing some of the problems associated with it.
When you're on this list that was previously secret, a police officer could look it up and then use that to hold you up to conduct a search that would later likely hold up because they can use your documentation as probable cause. People are on this list who do not deserve to be on the list. They're on it because of where they grew up, who their family is, for ridiculous things.
Now, in your story, Dana, you talked about this one fellow, DeAndre Brooks. He was featured at the top of your story. Give us high points of his what his case is.
So DeAndre Brooks, he is a 31-year-old San Diego man. He admits that back in his younger days, back in his teens, that he used the term gang affiliated. And that got him into some trouble with the law specifically. I don't need to go into all the specifics of his case, but he did go to prison. He served time. He's now out of prison. He has been for some time. He's gone back to school. He just graduated recently from City College, and he is planning to enroll at San Diego State this fall. So he's a person who says, I've left that behind many, many years ago. I'm no longer a gang member, but he's curious now if this could follow him, if his information is in the database. And to be fair, he does not know. He might be in there, he might not be.
And is it the case where the outside of law enforcement, the law enforcement arena, that people don't know whether or not they're on the list? Is that the list is not public?
Right, the list is not public. So, and it previously, if you thought you might be on that list, you couldn't even ask. You couldn't even find out. And that's what's changed with the start of this year, is that now a person who believes, hey, I think I might be on that list, they can now go to the law enforcement agency they suspect might have documented them and ask. They have to submit a written inquiry, and the department has 30 days to respond. So the list is less secret, or the database is less secret than it once was, but it's not as though, everyone, the thousands of names that might be on the list statewide will now become public. It's really if, I believe my information is in there, I can now make the inquiry.
It's kind of like the no-fly list, where you don't find out you're on the list until you try to get onto a plane.
Exactly.
Happens, yeah.
Exactly.
And Assemblywoman Shirley Weber has been behind some of those bills, trying to straighten out the problems with the list, make it become somewhat more transparent. What do the cops have to say? What do they say when they say say, you know, I shouldn't be on this list here, and what's their reaction to that?
Well, let's talk just a bit about the audit that was conducted. Last year, the results of a state audit were released that looked at the database and found that it did have some errors. Now, specifically, it looked at LAPD, Sonoma County Sheriff's Department, I believe Santa Clara was one of the agencies. San Diego PD was not one of those. So when I spoke to San Diego PD for this story, they mentioned that, you know, that we believe that our information that we have put into the database is accurate. However, if someone does come forward and say, hey, I believe I'm on this list and I should not be, at least the contacts that I made within the gang unit, they say, well, go ahead and ask. That's what the law says you can do now, and we will answer those questions. All
right, we're out of time. We'll look forward to more stories on that. It's a fascinating topic. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Jeff McDonald of the San Diego Union Tribune, Dana Littlefield, also with the Union Tribune, and Eric Anderson of KPBS News. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.